Okay, we're on. So I'm gonna first start by saying a thank you to all the folks who have listened to the previous episodes we've done, which were kind of us beta testing and trying to figure out how the system works, but also trying to get a chance to actually thrash out some issues. And some people were kind enough to give us feedback via Twitter or informally via WhatsApp or through other means. So thank you so much to those folks. I mean, they might not want their names to be called here. Someone is even so kind as to send us her PhD proposal, which was very, very relevant to the conversation, some of the conversations we've been having around what's left of the left in Nigeria and radical politics in Nigeria more generally. So that's very exciting for us. And yeah, we're really grateful for that kind of energy and response because it's just like three dudes chatting about politics and trying to make sense of things from a radical perspective. So we appreciate that kind of response and hope that we continue to get it. Please do continue to send us feedback, ways we can improve, suggestions for topics that we can broach, or whatever else you want to say. Particularly if you want to comment on Emeka's voice and how annoying it is, please do send. Um, those kinds of comments in particular are welcome. So,
Now,
um,
so
yeah. So, without further ado, I guess let's jump in.
Man, sitting on the porch, my boy XPM like your hood, man. so I'm gonna tell about mine real quick, boy. Yeah, let them know, man. Slash. Get him. I'm a Najapako boy, straight I like Bado boy. Way youths in the streets love palava, no joy in my hood. We are learning to stop talking good. The boys are buzzed up to just stop and rub Robin Hood. Stay indoors if you cherish your life. Cause along with tantrums and throw machetes and knives, caught in the midst of action. Arab boys from different groups and factions. Where the gamble, play, pool, and hate school with passion. The street schooled us to be wise. Learning from mistakes made, that's how
To
we
begin with, I
rise.
suppose we wanted to catch up a
Building for
bit
life, spreading
about
good vibes. Building dreams for
what's been
tomorrow,
going on
standing
so
by
far,
your side.
what's been going on since our last recording. So, in terms of like some sort of news items or issues that have been kind of on the mind of Nigerians of recent, um, one that struck us all was this issue of um, farmer herder clashes, particularly in the southwest. Um, so yeah, I mean, does anyone want to jump in and just like either provide some background into that or offer some perspective? I'm looking at you, Emeka.
Mm,
why me? Why me?
Why not you?
Okay, what do I know? Well, I mean, I haven't really followed this beyond beyond perhaps even just headlines and just general commentary on social media. So the sense I get is that is it the Ondo State governor s- gave an ultimatum to cattle headers in some forest reserve, asking them to leave the state, and then got a reply from Garba Shehu, who is the president's media aide. Is that what he is these days? I don't know anymore. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's in the news.
spokesperson
There's
or whatever.
Yeah. So and then there's this guy. The spin-off of that, I guess, and that's the one that's really on social media. And that's how I mean it's Agog on social media. It's this Sunday guy whose surname I can't pronounce. Um, who's uh,
Yeah,
who's um, who's
yeah. I can't pronounce. I can't remember his surname
I mean,
either.
I can remember. It's just I can't pronounce it.
Igboho is
Oh,
Igboho,
Okay,
Sunday Igboho.
is that a
so
Yoruba name?
Sunday
Uh,
Igboho.
Because that I even asked myself that same.
He's a Yoruba guy.
Oh, okay,
He's a Yoruba guy,
Right.
but we have to trace.
okay. But the guy, okay. So this guy, and does he have any affiliation with OPC? I tend to get that sense that he does.
I,
Anyways,
I think he does. I think he does. I think
okay. So, but anyways, what the guy has decided to do is to take it upon himself to enforce um, um, the directive of the Ondo State governor. Hope I'm not mixing things up, But also, he's also gotten a response from the Oyo State governor, where I think he resides in Oyo. Maybe I don't know why that is, but yeah. So in fact, I also read in passing somewhere that an order has been issued for his arrest and whatnot. So you have people like the former governor of Ekiti saying that it will be catastrophic to go that route. So you basically what you get is for something that has to do with for a problem that is essentially supposed to revolve around lives and livelihoods. Once again in Nigeria, it's been tainted with identity
Yeah.
politics, which usually is what the elite will resort to when they want to fool or scam everybody else. I mean, and that's in a nutshell is where I stand. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, this I agree with you. Like particularly where you say that this is kind of a classic um, instance of the Nigerian scam at play.
Mm. Yeah, I think so.
Um,
Because go
hmm?
ahead, go ahead.
No, no, no. After you, mate.
All right, I think so because we'll see that behind all this tussle is like majorly herder farmer clash, and behind it we have livelihoods, as Emeka had said, who has access to these grazing reserves, who are using their own power to encroach on these forest reserves, and then of course where you have tussle, then you start to have conflict where there's absence of abundance of resource for everybody. And then what dynamics this thing, how it plays out, like the state being behind a bunch of people, the posturing of the state, and then how it spins into a tribal issue and all are things that we have to look out for. And then again, it also is a testament to the inability of the ruling class to provide even the most basic needs for people in such a way that it removes our thinking from a tribalistic realm into where humans can just cohabitate and make do with what they have and even make themselves prosperous. But what we're seeing is a
Totally.
ruling class that doesn't care about anything because we look at who owns these cattle or this cattle that we have, and then who owns the grazing reserves, and who are the people the
Mm,
herdsmen are answering to. We'll see that it's all can be stripped down to the people versus a bunch of rich guys that feel as if they can continue the
right.
parasitic taking because it's like you're taking the ruling class takes from the
Mm,
Niger Delta the oil. Now they're taking forest reserves, and we know that these people are from up north. If we're going to go by the Fulani, whatever, how about land management, proper, forests,
right.
things like that. But they have
So,
proven not to go the route of progressive, you know, um, agricultural practices.
so that's what strikes me as well about it. Like on the one hand, I mean, even if you want to say that the part of the violence is being instigated by um, like the the elite, right? In the sense that they are out here kind of um, coming out supporting one segment of the kind of clashing, uh, rural people against another. Ultimately, neither farmers nor herds people are benefiting from the existing system. I think that's one aspect that I think gets a bit um, hidden in the media narrative around what's happening, such that when you read the headlines or hear like the kind of classic media conversation, or you see the responses from the kind of ethnic power brokers, be they in the north or south, they make it seem as though the elite are actually protecting the interest of their own co-ethnics. You know, so the power brokers in the southwest will frame it as though, oh, this is northern elite trying to protect herdsmen. And then like various northern elite will frame it as though, oh no, this is like southern governors or whatever trying to protect farmers. But that's clearly missing, as in both the ordinary farmer and the ordinary like cattle rearer, both of those people are losing out in this existing game, right? And
Most
that's
certainly.
hidden and mystified when these guys try to transform the issue into we need to protect the Southwest, or we need to protect the herdsmen, or protect the North, or whatever, because those are the people suffering the most, like at the bottom, and irrespective of ethnicity. So I totally buy that point, and I also like completely think the kind of question of ownership is completely missing from the conversation that you tend to see in the media, where you're talking about herdsmen as though those guys own the cat, as though the average like 14-year-old boy walking around with 20 cows or 100 cows or 150 cows is the owner. As though like the owners are not like much wealthier people sitting behind the scenes, like either empowering these guys or stepping away from them, making them vulnerable. um, and then the other complexity is that like it's not always clear that ownership maps onto ethnicity neatly. So to put it another way, like a lot of southwestern governors also own cattle, right? And like they might hire guys of whatever ethnicity, particularly northern guys, to take the cattle around. So like again, I think critically one of the key missing components from the public conversation so far has been this class component, where we clarify that the interests of the people who are speaking about this issue, both in the media and through their governor's house, and in the governor's house or from the presidency, the interests of those people seem quite separate from the interests of the people who have to live in those rural areas, either protecting their cattle and trying to sort of, you know, protecting their livelihoods as people who guard cattle, or their livelihoods as people who farm.
That's correct. That's correct. And like how the capitalist system exploits is mystifying that class
Mm,
component, the source of owner, means of production, who owns it, where's the wealth going to. The herdsmen are the fodder in this arrangement. The herdsmen
totally.
and the farmers, they are the fodder in
And
this
the
arrangement,
farmers,
and the farmers, they're the fodder in this arrangement, and
totally.
whatever plays out, the ruling class still laughs to the bank with their cow or whatever abattoir meat, selling it to the I don't know how that goes. Or I heard Louis Vuitton buys leather
Yeah,
from these guys. So like we have to
yeah, totally.
see this dynamics. If not, we're going to keep on making mistakes, and of course falling into, because if we don't get the class thing, then it means the other avenue to go is the tribal route, or maybe the religious route or something, so which is not,
Yeah, exactly.
which usually proves wrong. So we have to raise up that class thing and let them know, like, most of these southwestern governors have cattle. Their interest is interwoven
Exactly.
with the interest of the herdsmen, so we should
Right.
point that out.
Or they have land, or they have
So we
farmland
have,
as well.
yes, sir, yeah, they have farmland, so
You know,
you have to see those things at
and in
play.
some
And
cases they're even sort of, that's the other thing. In some cases they are even selling some of the land that is either supposed to be in grazing reserves or supposed to be in forests. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
land that is supposed to be removed
yeah, from the
from the commercial
grazing
market,
pathway, yeah,
right, is
yeah,
being commercialized. So
yes,
it's clear that sort of relations of capital are making the situation for ordinary people much less bearable.
of course,
And
yeah,
for these guys, ethnicizing it is an easy way to come out as the hero, because then you, like you said, they transform what is clearly a battle for resources, like across classes, into
yeah,
like, oh no, what your real enemy is this small guy here with the 14 cows, or this person here with the small farmland, not the major agriculturalists who are trying to seize this land from ordinary people, or the like major owners of capital of cattle who don't mind like putting these herdsmen in harm's way.
yeah. Essentially, that's what's going on now, and unfortunately, the level of consciousness of the average political commentator and Nigerian people watching, it's very easy for us to be dragged into that tribal stuff. It's like almost primordial, like, clan type of thing, So it's sad to watch the way the thing is spinning into a tribal stuff, but we just have to be the voice to point out these class interests and how they are interwoven so
Yeah,
that,
but
we see clearly and make the right analysis.
yeah, so sorry, but while it's interesting how I mean, the way I hear you guys frame this, I mean, it's really very interesting. But I also get the sense that, I mean, just listening to people, who are farmers. This isn't me being biased, but this is me just putting it out there that listening to people who are essentially farmers and smallholder farmers, people who aren't big capitalists per se, but who happen to farm on maybe 1 acre of land or thereabout. So a few plots of land. Hello. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the sense
I hear you, man.
the sense
Keep
that
going.
I get is that that this conflict is exists, and while we can take um the analysis that you guys have or the framing rather that you guys have introduced. I mean, while it's important to take that on board, it's also important to note that there are natural there are problems that have to do with, say, what's it called now, climate change, that's also responsible for some of this conflict, where resources that were previously available up north, say water, grasslands, are thinning out, and that's meant that so some of these things, some of these sentiments that allow for it to be framed in, I mean, some of the problems that allow for it to be framed in ethnic terms do actually exist. I mean, I think that it's important that we chip that in as well. I mean, that there are um, problems that have to do with the non-availability or the thinning out of natural resources that has also led to this migration of herdsmen and their cattle from the north down south, and that in doing this that they have also ended up causing considerable pain to smallholder farmers
Yeah.
who have invested maybe all of their life savings in trying to get um, crops to plant and harvest crops that they can
No,
then.
I mean there's certainly objective factors.
Mm.
Like one of them is climate change. So it's true that herders who are being pushed, like herding communities, are being pushed further down south
Yeah.
as like grazing resources are drying up further north. That's true. So it's increasing contact between peoples who had less frequent contact before. There are also structural factors like population growth. So now the availability of farmland is less. There's more people trying to farm more land. So again, like communities coming in contact more than before. But how that's interpreted subjectively is not predetermined. Like how people understand the nature of the people they're encountering, that's not predetermined. And I think the way the narrative is framed by these political actors and by the media doesn't help, like, doesn't encourage coexistence, doesn't encourage people to, because, mind you, you know, like herders coming down south seasonally has been a long running like practice. Some of these grazing reserves, like the practice of bringing cattle down from Niger or wherever, has been running as far as we know, like for a really long time. But as a result of this, like communities developed mechanisms for coexisting. Like farmers would take the manure, or they would like have cattle graze on the parts of the land that they would have cattle help like weed on their behalf. So there are ways to coexist that have existed for a long time. But for some reason, and sure, I buy your point if you're saying that these objective factors are making it harder. But I think that doesn't take away from the fact that it appears to be in the interest of this current crop of political leaders and of sort of media spokespeople to exacerbate the lines of division rather than kind of emphasize the ways in which like people can coexist. And I guess where OAG is coming in and where I'm agreeing is that it's hard to divorce it entirely from the kind of class perspective whereby there is an interest in trying to maximize holdings of land for the people who have that capacity, and also for the people who are sort of owners of large amounts of cattle. Like clearly, the interest of small, like individual farmers, the kind of smallholder that you're describing is not their primary concern at all. And those people seem like they're easy to push off the land, which is why you're seeing stories of the sort that we saw, that we were sharing in the group, where like the military comes in to whip villagers who like were uh, allegedly like responding by trying to push out herders in their community. Like which ordinary like cattle rearer can make that phone call to get the military to do that? So again, it sort of means that the class perspective, again, which seems absent from the conversation in the wider kind of discourse sphere, is critical to trying to make sense of what's happening, as well as the sort of climatic or demographic factors that are also important.
Mm. If I may come in there, one characteristic of this system is that it's also eats up the petty, like how the big system, the monopolies eat up younger and smaller capitalists. This is how the system, the
Mm,
monopolist of the land, and that's how it eats up those petty farmers, even petty herders that will be in the system, because they are going to be the ones that will be churned out for their lands to be taken, and for maybe their cattle to be acquired or whatever when they go out of business. Those that have the big guns of the government behind them, and the class that has the land holdings or that's able to muscle these guys out of the land will be the ones that actually now have the stake for it to be a bigger and ever more stronger monopoly on maybe the cattle grazing business or whatever. So, and then again,
mm.
how are we going to look at the nature of these elites that have been in the great cattle grazing business or herdsmen business for a long time? Like, how do you look at your own, aside climate change, what concrete steps have they put in place to ensure that they have grazing
Exactly.
reserves? And like, what did you look at for the whole of northern Nigeria to talk? Like, if you're taking a plane and flying over northern Nigeria, it is brown, means it's like you can't
Mm,
find even patches. Like, what have you guys been looking at over time? Rotational grazing, all these things. Like, it's not the, and like Side said rightly, you go into a place and then you graze. But yeah, climate change is there. But they will have intervention money. They chop the money. Give them green wall money.
right.
Project, they chop the money. What, like, so climate change. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
like I'm trying to downplay the tribal interpretations, or but we just have to look at these factors. Like, over time, like, agriculture needs to improve. It needs to be modernized. What has the ruling elite? What has all the people that these people that have access to these
Yeah.
resources? What have they? So that's where I'm coming in. Like,
Well,
there's
but
climate,
and
like,
also the ethnic component doesn't really tell us how to go forward, and it doesn't seem to be resolving the issue. Like the kind of ethnic
yeah,
framing has
yeah,
existed for as long as the issue has existed, and yet it doesn't seem to be helping us out. Like instead of that, it seems to be spitting out these new figures who then become the representative of X community, and so they
yes,
gain a new following, just like this guy
mm,
Sunday,
it's
that
Sunday,
that that you guys that the Mecca is talking about. So then
yeah.
the system has generated a new elite, but how has this guy helped to resolve either the? I mean, all he's saying is like, let us defend our land. So the likelihood is that his existence will only exacerbate the likelihood of more conflict because he's like, oh, let's defend Yoruba land against invaders.
Mm.
How? And is it is the real problem the invasion of Yoruba land, or is it more so that there's a collusion between both like Yoruba elite and northern elite to
That's the point.
like gain their resources at the expense of these little people, both
Exactly.
farmers and herders. And so that's what's like hidden in this kind of ethnicization of the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And moreover, it clearly doesn't
This
resolve the security issue. It just makes the security issue worse.
was, yeah, because the place will be heavily militarized, and
Right.
it goes down the slope over time. And yeah, this is how capitalism exploits. It mystifies the way it exploits people. It's not straightforward like the
Yeah.
feudal times and all, but it mystifies that exploitation. And also we have to always try to make it clear and point it out to people that this is what is most likely going on. you know though it's
Totally.
crazy that the Fulani, this has been their own mode of like their culture, so it's easy to peg it
Hmm.
and say, oh, this Fulani, like, but you see that most of these big guys in the southwest, they have cattle, so we have to look at that aspect too.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think Emeka
Totally.
is back. I think
And
Emeka is back.
yeah, yeah. Emeka, it sounds like you're back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Can you
Um,
hear us?
yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, dive in.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
dropped out midpoint.
yeah. I think yeah, I realized that. But what I was going to say is this. So what I hear OAG saying is that to a large extent, um, the herdsman, that's that sector of the economy that has to do with rearing of cattle and stuff hasn't managed to move from its pre-modern phase to a more modern phase where you have
Exactly.
grazing reserves and
No, but that's also
all of
true
that.
for that's also true for the
But that's
farming
also true
sector.
for
Like
farming.
the.
That's also, yeah. So you know yeah, that's basically, so what's true for the herders is also true for the farming, and maybe even more than the
Yeah.
scarcity of resource that has been wrought by climate change. It's possible that it's even more pertinent to the nature of this conflict is the fact that we're still stuck in modes of production that are archaic, that the time has come, that some of
Mm,
for us
mm,
to modernize these things. And I think that that's where probably I'm more willing to look at the
mm.
shenanigans of the Nigerian elites, across ethnic divide, whether they be northern or southwestern or even southeastern, because um, they haven't really shown what any resolve or to do that in any real sense, and that's where maybe sometimes you'd want to question their competence, and this is not me just being critical of government. I'm also being critical here about money bags who have the money to modernize this, except they are saying that the policies aren't there or aren't in place for them to want to take this on board. um but beyond that, yes, I think that this whole framing of it as ethnic, we need to be careful, especially when it would seem as though the blame or the fingers are being pointed towards the north, as the source of the conflict, which I don't know, might be right or wrong, but I'm not really concerned about that. I'm more concerned about why in 2021 we still need to see cattle, crossing major highways and all of that, and you know
Yeah, honestly, maybe the issue then is the highways.
Let me just add to that. You took the words out of my mouth and even refined it properly. And it's the same way. the ruling elites don't do anything about refining oil. Fanon talked about this class that they are so parasitic. They take and take. They don't modernize agriculture. He said specifically, because I'm working on a summary of the third chapter of that Wretched of the Earth, where it talked about the character of this ruling class, that they don't make any investments. They only keep taking. They are intermediary. They don't integrate agriculture proper. They don't modernize and integrate agriculture properly into the national economy. So this is the key points that you're hitting on, and when you have a mode of production that is archaic and doesn't attend to the needs of the time, and of course even goes into parasitizing on resource. Maker hit the point about the ruling elites not modernizing agriculture and upgrading it to the needs of the time, and that is what is giving out this conflict, especially in the juxtaposing with resources dwindling. And like I said, Fanon mentioned that the character of these ruling elites is that they don't make anything to improve. They don't improve anything. They just keep taking and taking. They don't improve agriculture. They do not modernize it. They don't make any form of investment. Especially, as we are confined to raw material stuff. It's the same way we've been selling crude oil, and then the side effect of that is environmental disaster, Mend and Niger Delta Avengers, So this is another side of the coin that we're seeing here now, the conflict of herding land and all that, and then the conflict of, communities that you're polluting for the oil thing. So it's really, crazy from this angle, looking at it. So yeah.
I think we'll probably need to give this a bit more space if we wanted to thrash it out thoroughly. And in fact, unfortunately, because of how recurrent this issue is, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity very soon to give it its proper space. So, for instance, this question of modernity or like modernizing agriculture is one that I'd want to push back a little bit on because, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is modern. This is a modern form of accumulation for this elite.
Mm,
Um, so
true, true.
this wasn't the way that they accumulated in the pre-modern Nigerian context. So, I mean, the question of modern versus non-modern, I mean, might not even necessarily give us exactly what we want here. But I
Well,
think that's something maybe we can thrash into a bit further down the line. But I suppose it's still relevant to the wider conversation we're trying to raise today, which is, I guess it's a vulgar way to put it is, why are we? What is it about this Nigerian scam as a concept that intrigues us? Um, and yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that.
Uh, okay.
As Emeka is the pioneer, so
You're right.
I would
Let,
suggest Emeka.
so let me just take a quick stab at it, and I'm going to be speaking, predominantly from my own point of view. Um, so it just hit me. I mean,
As opposed to before, when you were speaking from the global point of view or the divine point of view. Yeah, of course.
get away. Okay, but
Same.
yeah,
I'll be speaking from my own point.
but here,
I'm Saeed playing Saeed playing himself in this video.
okay, fine. Um, so what I was getting at before Said started to take jabs at me was is this. it crossed my mind a few days ago. I think about 2 days ago that the first time I consciously started to pay mind to what today is called the Nigerian left was 5 years ago at an event in Ile-Ife. Actually, at an event in OAU, right? And yeah, it was on the occasion of somebody called Biodun Jaifo who um, was lecturing at Harvard University. His birthday, I mean, it was his 70th birthday, I think I was astonished, to find that that there was such a thing as the Nigerian left, and that they had done what they had done, and a bit of what they had done, in terms of nation building or even the fight for independence. Yeah. So my own, I mean, if you ask why, for instance, I'm drawn to the idea of Nigeria as a scam, as the podcast suggests, is it's for me a question of ideology. If if push comes when push comes to shove, because I mean, if you look at the history of the Nigerian nation, what you'll find is that the tendency that saw to it that we got our independence when we did, um, essentially was the Nigerian left, and there isn't much you can say about this push for independence in Nigeria without talking about the Zikist movement. Unfortunately, it's not a movement that if you mention today, many
Totally.
people are conversant with. But um,
So there, the
so
scam is
so yeah,
about like the
so
lack
the
of
scam is about no, the scam for me is ideological. So it's about at what point
mm,
what chain of events led to them being to these guys being shortchanged or sidelined, and what is essentially the crop of the ruling elite that we have today, the right, and how they came into power, and they then became the guys who led the country, at once we got our independence. And I'm talking essentially about figures like Nnamdi Azikiwe and
mm,
and Obafemi Awolowo and the Sarduana was Amadu Bello
sorry.
and yeah. So and I
Mm,
said this is more of Said's fault if I remember. So we're talking about parties like the MPC, talking about parties like the NCNC, parties like
AG.
what's it called, the AG, as opposed to other left parties that did exist or came up, um, at certain times between the 1940s and right after independence. So for me, if I was to think about the Nigerian scam, it would be in terms of what was it, what interests were at play between the British, the colonial government, the Home Office, the colonial office in Great Britain at the time, and the guys who were in charge, the colonial administrators here, and members of the Nigerian elite that kind of robbed, left, which history tells us was the oldest tendency, of its beats, really.
mm. Super interesting.
Mm, that's profound. Yeah. Also, we'll probably just add, that um, maybe this is just taking another side that it's very very essential. Yeah, and this is not to even downplay the efforts of the left at all, but maybe a little bit of underestimation of the power of capital and imperialism might have played a role in them lose guarding in quotes. So what do you think?
Mm.
Can you say that again? Wait, I didn't get that. Sorry.
Okay, I said maybe underestimating the power and the maneuvers of the right of capitalism or imperialism might have played, a role in being shortchanged, in being in the left being shortchanged and, strategically sidelined, from, getting their hands really on what it is that they struggled for. What do you think about that?
So are you saying in effect that the left was not scammed, they were just beaten fair and square? Kind of oh,
Maybe they just underestimated. I don't know. Like I wasn't there,
right,
but
right.
from what all we studied, and the trajectory which Nigeria is on, like we just has there must have been a reason, for that losing out like that. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming with you
I,
guys on
I,
that.
I think I think that I, I don't know. It's difficult, but the stories are there. I mean, so and it's a sad situation, that we find ourselves in. So while everybody, I mean, even people who will be born next year or in 10 years' time would grow up to find out and learn about people like Nnamdi Azikiwe, for instance, or Obafemi Awolowo, they would hardly in an entire lifetime, even if they live up to 80, learn about names like Raja Abdallah, for instance, or Mokogo Okoye, or Ondukaize, for instance, or Ikenan Zimiro. Um, these were the guys who came together and formed, I mean, the Zikist movement. They probably would even know about Ogedegbe Macaulay, who was about Macaulay's own son, But and for me, I think that there's been even though this isn't a blame that should be cast solely at the feet of historians or the kind of the part the part of our own history that has been told. Even though I am of the opinion that um, the Nigerian history has been told, in a way um, that kind of how do I say it now? I'm looking for the word to shield the history of the left, which is a very big part of the Nigerian, history itself, to relegate it to the background, such that contemporary, historical narratives don't even find a place for it, and I think that this is deliberate, if you ask me. But also, the left hasn't done its own job of, setting down its own history. So it's a two-way street, but to
Mm.
answer your question, if I hear you correctly, it's more the case that um, the British government, um, the colonial government. So when I say the British government, I'm saying the British government on the home front now. Somewhere in the 1940s, at the time when Labour actually, which is even funny here, at the time when Labour was, and I think it was Clement Attlee who was the British Prime Minister at the time, were in power in Great Britain, had seen or found that that their own interests didn't pretty much align with the demands that leftists, who were essentially members of the Zikist movement, were making, demands that they were making at the time. And it's also important that we place this within a historical context. So we're talking essentially about just after the Second World War, where all around the world, where Britain had held colonial, where colonialist demands were being made, for some form of self governance. It's also at the time when India in 1947 had just gotten its own independence, and at the time when Britain essentially was broke, and people forget that this is the time when the world powers as we know them today came together and crafted what today is the capitalist system that we live in, in terms of things like globalization. This was basically the time when organizations like the World Bank was formed, so they understood that things couldn't work the way that it used to, and that there was a need to redesign um, the economic system of the world, and go about colonialism in totally different ways, so it's more economic, more it became more economic than it was, one of political domination, in that sense.
Yep. It sounds like Emeka's vision of or understanding of the Nigerian scam is quite historical, as in it's about the interaction between the colonial state, the labor movement in the nationalist period, the left in the nationalist period, and then the rise of conservatives or the kind of conservative elite in the nationalist period. Um, but how about today? Like OG, I mean, what's your view? Like, did that set the
Yeah,
tone in a kind of um, path dependent way?
yeah. I feel when the departing powers want to hand over the country to maybe the new leaders or the national middle class or national bourgeoisie are supposed to be the president or people in the helm or at the helm of affairs. They make sure that it intersects with their own long-term interests, and this is what was essentially served to us as independence, like flag
Mm,
independence. And then once we've been put on that trajectory, we just kept on. And of course, what Emeka said, that's playing down of the history of the left, essentially right, almost even writing it out of contemporary, out of the history, makes it hard for us to even trace fully where we got it wrong because it just felt like, oh, a bunch of people just took themselves to this thing, took the independence and came back and started messing it up. So that's why it's essential to look at that historical background and then, of course, see what led to it in terms of
mm.
the meshing of the interests of the British and of course the native ruling class that got the power during the independence movement and all that. So and continuing and as what Nigeria has turned out to be for the past 60 years now, we can see essentially that it is really a scam. For a country not to be able to get up off its own back, and it's really a scam. So yeah, that's where the Nigerian scam goes in because what makes a nation independent, everything that comes together, to making that constellation of independence is not in our sky. So that's what I feel.
But I want to pose a question: like, is it possible that the nation state itself is a scam? I mean, is it possible that, in a sense, when you have this fixed boundary, this waving flag, national military, national anthem, like that confuses people about what the kind of project of human
Yeah,
emancipation
I
is
don't know if
fundamentally?
I, I don't know if
Like,
Emeka
where's the
wants to say
nation?
something to that, but let me just quickly
Where's the nation not a scam? And then, of
let me
course, I
let
want to
me
touch
let
on
me
I
quickly
want to
say
touch on
something.
Yahoo Boys, which is where a lot of people's minds will go when they hear about Nigerian scam. Um, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Emeka wants to say something.
Yeah, I think that the implication of whatever arrangement, the guys who took over, I mean, the class of people and who took over power. I mean, and I'm naming names here, the Nnamdi Azikiwe's of this world, and the Obafemi Awolowo. The deal that they struck, with the imperialists and the imperial powers was such that Nigeria had to be designed in a way that favored just them, that class of people, and the the the
Exactly.
and then the companies that represented British interests. So we're talking about the mercantilist class essentially here. We're talking about companies like UAC, whether it's called the Unilever today or what. We're talking about the companies like John Holt's of
Real
this world,
Niger.
yeah, Royal Niger, and so that's the history that we're looking to dig up here. If we're going to talk about what.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, but look. I mean, I want to play the devil's advocate a little bit because I think a lot of Nigerians, like for better or worse, are hesitant to think so far back to the colonial period. You know, people will say, "I don't quote blame end quote the colonial state," and I mean, of course, there's a lot of rubbish that view has. The kind of vulgar version of that view is trash. But I think there's like people will say, okay, but we've had several opportunities to rewrite our constitution, for instance, and we've had several opportunities to renegotiate the basis of like Nigeria as a collective existence politically and economically. So, um, does the moment of the scam have to be traced all the way back to 1914 or 1960 or whatever? Like, isn't it maybe more recent in time, like 1999 or 1979? In these moments when we, in theory, were having some sort of handover or some sort of constitutional change. So this is, I'm going to index this along with the other questions about, is the nation state in general not probably also a scam, insofar as it creates this massive distraction about what we should actually be pursuing, as human beings.
So, if I want to get into that, and this is very, very interesting and something that stuck into my own mind, reading this
Mm,
guy's theory, Cabral's theory, and he uses the word illusion, talking about the nation state now. He says this illusion, talking about nation, this illusion is reinforced by the existence of a political power, the national state, composed of native elements. It is only an illusion since in reality it is a subject to the ruling class of the foreign nations. Like those are the industrial. So when you get your flag and all the what you call the wrapper, there's the sweet that's inside, and then there's the wrapper. So once you have the wrapper of independence, but you don't get the main content of it, that illusion that you have your flag, your currency, and all that, people that cannot see the functions and functionality of the class that got that wrapper will have been bamboozled into thinking that they have something solid until when the
mm,
state starts functioning, in how it's been set up to function. So essentially the flag becomes something that certifies the oppressive arrangement. The currency is what
mm,
facilitates the export of capital. The class there is what oversees that export. And then, of course, the army, the state itself, machinery becomes the thing that keeps the people down. So it becomes a full time scam as the system progresses. In the earlier times, it might not seem like that, but going on, and when the contradictions of the system starts eating the system up, it now becomes a full scam. Only the system is just doing what it's
mm,
designed to do, but it's a scam. And this is what Cabral says, like that nation state, that flag and everything is an illusion. So which means we have to think like which what Emeka said, that mercantilist class, and then of course the native elites that probably even got their education abroad, been schooled in the manners and mannerisms of these guys, will just come and input the operating system of exploitation into the native homeland. So yeah.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I buy that, and of course, our focus here is on Nigeria. So, um, I think one has to be attentive to the Nigerianness of the scam, and the way in which the scam takes on a particular form in the post-colonial context. But I think that I'm tempted to say that the nation state in general is often like when you're describing the flag as a wrapper that is used to bamboozle, like it seems to me as though even in the colonial times, the British flag at home was also bamboozling the British working class and ordinary British people into thinking that the empire represented their interest in any meaningful way. I
Y-
mean,
y-
sure, some of the surplus, like through labor struggles and through like people trying to fight back, some of the surplus eventually trickles down, you know.
y-
But fundamentally, like, the sort of borders, the flag, the national anthem, all these things, like, have not necessarily redounded to the benefit of the majority in any country. Um,
yes,
so
yes.
I guess, like, maybe in fact the scam is something more fundamental than Nigeria, and Nigeria is only revealing its own version of the
Of
wider
the
scam.
scam. Yeah. So what we've been able to sort of unwrap is that what interests is the arrangement called the nation state fulfilling, and what class is that, because what gives legitimacy to any arrangement is this arrangement in the interest of the people or not? So we might have another setting which might not be the nation state and all that, but once that setting again doesn't cater to the needs of the people and of course, maybe do what it's supposed to do, then it becomes a problem, and it becomes a scam too. So if the state itself, is in the service of the people, then it gets its legitimacy, and if it's not, it becomes a scam. That's what I feel.
Mm. Aha. No, I buy that. So you're saying that this isn't inherent to the nature of the nation state, as in a state can actually be pulled out of the scam and used in the service of its people.
Well, for communist way of thinking, what we are aiming for is, stateless, classless type of thing, But
Sure.
for this transition period and this historical time that we're inside of, and which we're seeing China and some other, socialist states, doing, there's a transition period where the state is wrestled away from this parasitic class and then used in the interest of majority of the people. That's why you can have China lift up 800 million people out of poverty, doing the tremendous things that they've been able to accomplish. So it's important for the state to represent the interests of the people, and then we can now move forward into an arrangement that makes more sense, which might even make the nation states obsolete.
Mm. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as endorsing entirely the Chinese model, but I do get your point.
Yeah, not
uh,
endorsing it, not endorsing it, but I'm
yeah,
not endorsing it, but
yeah,
we
sure.
can't look away from the fact that the tremendous material benefit, like it's not something to be no matter the analysis, we
Yeah, sure.
can't. Yeah, so that's where I'm standing. So yeah, like that thing is important to look at so that we can now build further. There's a transition phase whereby, because China is not operating in a vacuum, you know it's operating within the same capitalist system, and of course it's not there's no switch that says when I put it off and then we put it on and then we just transform into something that is pure. And no, there will be nothing like that. So China is going through its own phase, and hopefully they are thinking of ways to
Yeah,
make sure that they have a system that is more equitable and all that. So
but
Africa,
how
what is
about in the
Africa
West?
doing?
Like,
The West is
yeah,
just
I mean, how,
they are the
like
West is
countries like Britain or the US. I mean, I guess, and here I'm thinking not only about their ruling classes,
mm,
but also about their left, as in their labor movements and stuff. Like
I
they've
think.
won certain concessions in history, right? They've been able to win, like to at least have certain vestiges of a welfare state.
Yeah, yeah,
There was a moment in the West where the economy was improving people's qualities of life quite dramatically. Um,
yeah.
maybe that moment has passed in a way for a lot of Western countries, but I mean, yeah. So I guess, do you see the nation state as like less of a scam there as well, or
I don't think it's even more of
how
a
would you
scam. I
assess it
think
relative to Nigeria?
it's more of a
Right.
scam there. It's an even greater scam there because one, it's what's been used to make life miserable for us here. So it's playing a double role of
Right.
imperialism now. And then of course it is now beating back the gains that the people have made over the years. So it's more dangerous over there, but because capital is so concentrated over there, it's so bloated, and then they can still get, some concessions here and there, but it's more dangerous and more of a scam, more concealed, over there than here. It is crude over here and more barbaric,
Mm,
but it is more dangerous and more of a scam. Something that is disguised and almost a perfect scam. People can take the American system or the Western system to the church as if it's something holy and all that.
mm,
Everybody knows in Nigeria that this system is crazy. But I think what
yeah,
we now call a scam is how well something is concealed. And if it's about concealing
absolutely.
stuff, then the foreign one is crazier than what we have here.
Absolutely. I mean, because in a sense, like Nigeria is very obvious with its scam. Um,
Yeah,
in terms of the ruling elite. I mean, the guys who are like, yeah, like hardly anyone is unaware that this is not ideal, you know.
Yeah, you
Um,
know.
so yeah, I get that point. Okay, but where do you think Yahoo? How do Yahoo boys fit into this? The classic archetype of Nigeria and scamming.
I just they are all side effects of the system. They are side effects of the
Mm,
system, and it's just unfortunate that when you don't. And I'm not making any excuses for theft and all that, but let's have a society that gives everybody opportunities first, and we'll go from there.
mm,
Let's just have
true.
a society that gives everybody opportunities first, because the prevalence of crime is more than like, if we're going to look at it, then everyone is a criminal in this country, you know because the system
Mm,
literally forces you into doing things illegally. And again, there's a relationship between how things are done at the top and how things will be below. If you're stealing with pen and paper on top, then the man that has access to internet and can lie to people will do it below. If that is the order of the day, if
mhm,
fleecing is the order of the day, the dominant order of the day, where the ruling class has enshrined that, and not even created an opportunity for us to divert our energies into positive stuff, then stealing on the lower class too will be something that will be prevalent, be it using the computer
mm,
to steal, or be it using guns for armed robbery, or be it lying to people and all that, or petty crimes. So I just want a society. Let's start from building a society that gives everybody opportunities. Then once we have opportunities, then most likely the tendency or the criminality will reduce drastically and permanently. And then the remaining that wants to still go into crime for the thrill or and all that, then we now know that these people are really criminals. But in a country that has deprived people, yeah, in a country that has deprived people of proper living, then we should expect that crime would dot the terrain, you know, the more the system progresses, because it's essentially a scam. The country is a
mm.
scam, the system is a scam. So when you have scammers coming out of the scam, then there's an interaction between the system and what we get up top and below.
But how about the people who say? How about the people who say? And Emeka, you can jump in if you're back on now. But how about the people who say like, "Oh, Nigerians are not scammers; we are entrepreneurs." The guys,
Mhm.
like the guys online or the sort of middle class liberal perspective. Like, what's your response to those
So
guys?
you
Like who are all
you said
like,
it, everybody
"No, don't portray us.
everybody
Don't portray us as scammers. In fact." We are just trying to start our online media company or our bakery or our soap factory.
It's an interesting conversation, when you bring the Yahoo beats into this. Um, Not well, especially because I have heard the argument to say that perhaps that what Yahoo is essentially is that it's boys collecting some form of reparation for all that was taken out of Africa, from the days of slave trade and all of that. Unfortunately, that bit resonates with me only, you know, except the fact that a lot of people who are making these arguments don't even have the theoretical backing to. I mean, they haven't even read the literature. But yes, a lot was taken out of Africa. In fact, Africa was designed, and that relationship between the West, the colonial governments, and the African states that they gave birth to or that they handed over to, was designed in such a way that resources from Africa and capital would essentially move out from from these states to the metropole. So when people make that argument, I find it interesting. But I also find it interesting because if people knew or had the theory to back it up, it would essentially mean that perhaps the guys who we call the Yahoo people are the guy who are basically understand, the kind of scam that this country is, and the nexus between the colonial governments and the states that they have been forced to live in, and the kind of dwindling poverty that has that has made resulted in the phenomenon itself. So yes, I find that uh, I find it very funny, really, if you ask me that um, when you look at, or when we think about that, one way to think about Yahoo as a response to the social economic climate of the Nigerian state, you would find that it kind of mirrors the kind of relationship that the Nigerian state has with or the Nigerian state has increasingly had with its colonial lords, or Europe essentially, where one is a parasite and the other is a leech.
Mm. So how about the alternative? I guess now in the final kind of minutes of the conversation, like I wanted to turn to discussing the alternative. Like what's left of the left, I guess. Like where does the left fit into this question of the scam? Is there any resistance that you see emerging? And if not, why not?
I think Emeka should go for this.
Yeah, yeah. This has Emeka's name written all over it.
Uh, that's a loaded question, to be honest. And I don't even know that the Nigerian left has it's presently constituted as well equipped for it. And it probably is. I mean, if you talk, individually about people who associate with it, so that it's not so much that the argument can be framed, and it has been. I mean, if and this is I'm sure you both know about Badi Onimode, who's written extensively about a whole book dedicated to trying to explain this relationships as they exist. But I think that what the job today is to try and explain to an increasingly young population of Nigerians who don't have any clue what went before, how this whole phase of pre-independence, independence, and post-independence is linked has been linked together to give us the kind of state that we have, and that basically that in essence that what Nigeria really has is a design problem, and that design problem is essentially because Nigeria was designed to serve neoliberal interests, so that when you find people like, and I'm going to, and really I'm not going to hold back, when you find people like, even people like Okonjo Iweala or Obi Ezekwesili or El Rufai, I mean people like these people who have gone uh, and taking hook, line, sinker what the white man has sold them in places like Harvard, and they've become mouthpiece of neoliberal interests, so that they're in bed with figures. Yeah, so that they're in bed with figures like Tony Blair and his New Labour movement, which is essentially what some rebranded form of neoliberalism. It's and you hear very young, interesting figures within the Nigerian commentary, talk, and then you know that it's not getting better. It's worsening, and these are the guys who have all the influence on when I mean when you speak of the public domain. I mean, I'm not going to edify them by mentioning their earnings. But I think that people who are more dangerous to people like me are the El Rufais of this world, and Okonjo Iweala, who has had to go and take an American citizenship simply because she then wants to become the chair of the World Trade Organization. Essentially, what are we talking about? What's she going to be doing for Nigeria if she becomes, or Africa when she becomes, if she gets her wish? Those
That's
are
a
the
very
kind of
interesting point.
questions
That's a
that
very
that
interesting point, and yeah. No, sorry, I'll let
yeah,
you wrap up, man.
Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that I spend my waking hours, really thinking about when we know that, the lopsided nature of the relationship that we have was simply facilitated by trade in slaves, trade in resources and whatnot.
I mean, I think what strikes me forcefully about that point, even though it doesn't answer the question, and
Mm.
I'll reframe the question again for AG,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think what's really insightful about that point is that I think you're pointing out how some of the leading lights of the Nigerian scam domestically are now actually staking their claim within the global scam system, as it were. So, like the Nigerian scam itself is like very integral to the wider architecture of like the modern neocolonial or sort of neoliberal capitalist project, such that we have even sort of homegrown figures of the sorts of the names that you're naming, attaining major recognition within the system globally, which of course a lot of people celebrate, right? But I think it's worth pointing out that historically that's not done very much for the farmer or the herder, or indeed the left intellectuals. But I guess, yeah, I mean, to answer repose the question about resistance, because here you're talking again about the system, but OAG, where's the resistance? And also, where's the resistance in the traditional, um, in its traditional locales? Like, where is there a radical labor movement? To what extent are where have the radical intellectuals gone? And is there a possibility if they're no longer, you know, clearly as they are no longer as vibrant as they used to be, what's the possibility of reviving that?
I think I'll just have to say to buttress or take Emeka's point home that the young people now have to be re-educated and connected with
Mm,
the history of the country. And whose work is it to do that? We have a labor movement that is, maybe I don't want to use the word comatose, but they've not done much to impress me. And this again is a testament to the power of how capital can infiltrate what we even call the labor movement. So it now leaves us to the organic realm now of organizing and of course making some sort of movement outside of this power structure and organic organization. And we can start seeing, or we should start seeing like spots of action, if it's the revolution now thing, if it's the end SARS thing, if it's people that come together that kind of instinctively question the arrangement. When you have something as a scam that is showing up as a scam and people are questioning this arrangement, then it means more fundamental questions are being asked. And then how do we now link up with such people to give a structural analysis and, of course, give a structural program to what it is that um, we want to see in terms of the way and the alternative pathway that Nigeria can follow. And there are movements that are in its nascent stages, take it back,
mm,
you have a scam, so take it back. It's that word is pregnant. What do you want to take back from who? That kind of thing. So it is now left for the left
mm,
to come together, start, connecting with the older guys if they are still alive for historical guidance, and then of course make an up-to-date analysis of what is happening in the country now, and then of course come up with something coherent and a program and plan of action. We have Coalition for Revolution, Take It Back. There was a Socialist Workers League, those kind of things. So how do we unify this force, come up with a certain program, and then move on it so that we'll have made some gains and we'll have made covered some grounds in the next couple of years that we are going to be heading towards. So those are things that I feel should be
mm,
done: proper education, mobilization of people, and most importantly connecting the material conditions to the system that is causing it, so that people will now know that there's a need for a change of the system. So yeah, so I think that should be done.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess that brings us back to where we often land, is on the question of education. And over here, it seems like you guys are kind of emphasizing education that targets the young, and that makes sense from the perspective of demographics. I mean, I guess most of the country is young, but I sometimes also wonder whether like youth itself is like a social category that can be mobilized in an organized manner. And this ties back to the question about to some of the conversations we were having related to NSAS. And I say this because like youth doesn't necessarily give people like kind of organizational form or necessarily a shared consciousness. Like, yeah, in a gerontocratic society, young people can to some extent understand that their position is suboptimal because they don't have access to the resources that the elders have to a certain extent. But aside from that, I guess I feel a bit of skepticism about the extent to which youth alone can be a kind of unifying force. And there, I feel that as much as there are limitations within the labor movement, um, that to some extent that also reflects the weaknesses of kind of socialist organizations like the left intellectualism as well. And so it calls, from my perspective, for more engagement with working class organizations and formal sector organizations rather than kind of abandoning them entirely in favor of focusing more on students or the youth or all of this like kind of alternative forms of organizing that might aim to evade structures rather than engage with them.
But
I
but
think
but but but,
Coalition
but
for
Said,
Revolution and other sorry, Emeka, I'm sorry. I think Coalition for Revolution and AAC and all they work with
no, no, go ahead.
P1 informal bodies and all that. So I'm not saying that we should divorce structure. No,
Okay.
with structure is very important, But now we have a youth population that is lagging in understanding. The same way these neoliberal
True.
ideas and capitalist idea is the dominant idea in their brain. It's the same way the left should try to create a sort of program to infuse these our ideas into the terrain of discussion, at least, so that they can see another perspective and alternatives, while the coalitions and other organizations and even other left-leaning parties will continue the structural work. So all these things can go in tandem and then even side by side. So yeah.
Mm,
Bam, bam.
that's fair.
That's. If I have anything to add, which I don't think I do, I think that's really it. Safe to say that when you look at the demography of Nigeria, it's interesting to note that there's not much that any political movement or any movement of any sort can do without the youth population. And if you have a youth population that's shown up to be bereft of any idea what operating ideology that the left has, I think that you need to want to stick your head out and see how it is that you can reverse that tendency. Um, who are those who are going to be educating the Nigerian youth? It would be guys who are perhaps maybe in their 60s or even 70s or and 50s today. So so when you say movement, you're talking about numbers, and that numbers will come from essentially that population that I'm not. I don't think anybody is naive enough to think that it's going to be an organizing force in that sense. And I don't know anywhere in the world. So when you even look at the chemistry or the cooperation that you see between people like AOC in the Democratic Party, for instance, with people like Bernie Sanders, you see that there's some sort of move across generations and age divides, and it's also something that you see in Britain when you talk about Corbyn and everywhere else where socialist movements are propping up and really staking a claim to power. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that progression here in Nigeria, and that's what we're asking for. I mean, in what ways can we apply ourselves to come to get us to that point where the left ideology proves to become an alternative to what really exists, because it breaks my heart when I hear these guys who are more in the other day some guy was quoting Adam Smith to me, and I wanted to run mad, an African quoting Adam Smith and telling me,
No, but people like to quote Adam. Have you noticed that's the next intellectualism here. People like to quote Adam Smith for some reason.
and I'm like,
Why are these guys quoting Adam Smith?
why you so you think that you think you can that you can bluff me, by throwing big names,
No, but it's like one of your friends said on Twitter. I saw somebody you follow said on Twitter. They're like, a lot of our intellectuals nowadays have given up on importing Western solutions to African problems and have just started importing Western problems.
Yeah, I know. I have. I mean, and this, and and shit. So what I think, yeah, I mean, nice observation. But what I think this suggests, broadly speaking, is that the ground is fertile for planting, seeds of leftist ideology or some alternative ideology, which I mean, which we would really need to contest, the predominant one, which really, when if you've read enough to take the fight to them, you realize that the proponents of this ideology is basically haven't read shit, don't even know anything, to be honest. It's
Yeah, I
all
agree.
they have is that proximity to
You're ruling
well,
class and
more established,
yeah,
neoliberals, yeah, like the Obi Ezekwesili's of this world, who make it a duty to want to draw them close to their side for whatever,
that's how the
political
system thrives
or
anyway.
social. Yeah, that's how it thrives, really. And
Totally.
yeah, so that's so we need that synergy, between age divides in within, on the left side of this divide, where you people come together across age divides and see how they can mobilize, the working class. I think we need to take it up one notch or two. Places like Fiwan, places like ASCAV, and organizations like that. I mean, first things first, we need to make sure that this organization become visible, that people know them, just one at the mere mention of their names. That's what needs
Totally.
at least to be done,
Um,
first
well, I mean,
first.
there's a lot more to say about education, how you do it, how we'll make sure that it's not a kind of middle class intellectual project that sort of tries to tutor um, the sort of noble savages, et cetera, et cetera. But I suppose we can't thrash that all in this podcast, this episode. Um, so we should probably draw it to a close just because of time. But I found that to be a really interesting conversation. The parts of it that weren't broken up by the connection, anyway. And I hope you guys did too, and I hope the listeners did too. So if there are no final thoughts, maybe are there any final thoughts from any others? Okay. Amaka, you good? Okay, that sounds like Amaka's good. All right. Well, we'll end it there then. Ciao.